Hello and welcome back to my humble show. I'm your host for today and every other day, the Articulate Thinker. Hopefully, here to bring you art, articles, and articulations straight from Articulation Station, where I'll be assessing the situation. So be sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the ride. Don't forget to turn on those bell notifications while you're at it. I'm in a rush right now because I have to go back to work in a few minutes. So this will be a short show, or at least I hope so. No promises though, since I'm not a politician. I do have my sneaking suspicion that, well, Donald Trump is very popular indeed, and I must say before I proceed that I am disappointed in the results of the Iowa Caucus. Come at me, bro. If you don't like it, come at me, bro. That's right. In my mind, Donald Trump is a bit of a wild card. A wild card who was only effective once, and the effectiveness is actually debatable, considering he was a live by the sword, die by the sword type of candidate, and he ended up dying by the sword more so than living by the sword in the end at the time of the last election cycle, the 2020 election, that is. And lo and behold, we are now dealing with a geriatric buffoon named Joe Biden. So I would argue that Donald Trump was not as effective, not nearly as effective as his base would obviously continue to like to believe. But they do continue to believe everything that comes out of his mouth, and therefore he had a great success in the Iowa caucus as of yesterday. Here are some numbers on the screen for you, and I'll go ahead and move my face out of the way so you can see them all. Donald Trump, he was at the top of the list. That's right. Then DeSantis, then Haley, then Ramaswamy, then Hutchinson, then Christie. Forget about the two at the end there. Forget about Ramaswamy even, because although he had promised, there's that word again, promised great success, he ended up having to drop out immediately after the Iowa caucus ended, if not before it ended. And he, of course, immediately endorsed Donald Trump. So he is vying for that vice presidential position or something like that. Think of him what you may, and I may speak more about him in the near future because I think he had some strategic issues, and that was only partly because of his own fault. I mean, he only had so many strategies to choose from, considering he had no record to run on, and it was therefore rhetoric or bust. Well, rhetoric and bust in the end for him, but hey, we'll see where things go for him in the future. He apparently has not pissed off Donald Trump too much because they are on good terms now that he has dropped out of the race and supported Donald Trump. And I do imagine that if even if Ron DeSantis were to drop out of the race today and endorse Donald Trump as every other establishment and so-called non-establishment, so-called anti-establishment Republican seems to be doing, well, he would be back under the good graces of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump would be pretending that he wasn't all that much opposed to Ron DeSantis in the first place. Because that's just how things seem to go, whether it's Marco Rubio or Doug Burgum, for goodness sakes, who not too long ago was saying, I'd never do business with Donald Trump, because of his character. And now he is up on stage shaking hands and with the man he said he would never do business with. That's just how it goes. That's how it works. And if you're one of these Republicans, as most Republicans seem to be, who think that that is great and that Donald Trump should be the one at the top of the ticket, though this is just the Iowa caucus and therefore does not represent the ultimate outcome necessarily, you probably aren't going to like what I have to say. You probably don't like what I have said already, and that's okay. On my other channel, my Articulate Thinker News Clips channel, every time I post videos, clips, compilations, which depict Donald Trump in the negative light, in which he tends to depict himself in, if you ask me, well, I end up losing subscribers. And I may do that on this channel too. I may lose subscribers, but hopefully people can appreciate my somewhat nuanced, that's what I call it, even though I didn't initially like the word nuanced. Seems a little bit narrative controlling sometimes, depending on who's saying it and when. But yes, I do try to be nuanced. I do try to be unbiased to a certain extent. when judging outcomes and incomes. For example, I found it interesting that Vivek Ramaswamy considered the two richest Republican candidates to be the only two who were not bought and paid for. Could just be a coincidence, and I'm only mentioning that because I just mentioned the word income. But things like that I try to point out regardless of who the politician is. But yes, that's just me. And speaking of people who don't exactly make a lot of friends in mainstream Republican politics, or in mainstream Democrat politics for that matter, someone by the name of Anomaly. He's a podcaster himself, of sorts, social media figure, and I'm only mentioning him because he came out with a prediction the day of the Iowa Caucus, except for just before the Iowa Caucus, and he turned out to be spot on, hit the hammer on the head, and therefore the nail on the head. That was an unnecessary way of wording that. He hit the nail on the head with the hammer. Positions 1 through 4, at least. Once again, going back to this list, this 99% complete list. I believe CBS still says that it's at 99%. But, if you can see the numbers on the screen there, they're pretty much going to be the same wherever you look at this point. The result is pretty much in. Plus, there were less votes to choose from this time around because of the weather. Less voters coming out. And those who did come out came out strongly in favor of Donald Trump. But back to Anomaly. Anomaly said that Donald Trump would be first, and that it would be relatively distance from the second place candidate, who would be, according to Anomaly, DeSantis. Fact check, true. He said Nikki Haley would be somewhat close behind him. Fact check, true again. And he said that Vivek Ramaswamy, would surprise himself, but in the wrong way, and that would mean that he would be vastly unsuccessful, as he was. He did not receive a vast number of votes, which is no surprise if you ask me either, because he was basically running as Donald Trump 2.0, which only goes so far if Donald Trump is still in the race, and therefore people can just vote for him, which is why Vivek Ramaswamy made his final pitch twist right at the end: vote for me in order to save Donald Trump. His whole argument had to merge into Donald Trump is going to get eliminated from this race, and therefore you need to vote for me even though he's still in the race, because he won't be in the race for long, and therefore I need all the support I can get now in order to save him. So whether or not Donald Trump, all things considered, is truly ready to embrace him now that Vivek Ramaswamy has dropped out and endorsed Donald Trump, who knows? Who knows? They're both businessmen. Well, I say that Donald Trump is a businessman and Vivek Ramaswamy is a salesman, which once again goes to the irony of the fact that Vivek Ramaswamy says they're the only two candidates who are not bought and paid for, since, they're the ones who have had their hands in the most amount of pockets over the course of their lives. In Ramaswamy's case, a much shorter life. All right, so I just have a few things to read through here before I ramble on any further. Hopefully I haven't bored you as of yet. Let me read this. Well, the Iowa caucusing has reached its conclusion, and aside from certain MSM entities calling it early in a way which outraged MAGA members in previous elections, there was very little confusion. In fact, it's official. Trump Attachment Syndrome, aka TAS, is alive and well, and although Donald Trump didn't conduct himself as someone willing to earn an election victory, it's clear that his base still willingly embraces his sense of entitlement. And by the way, what I was referring to when I mentioned MSM entities calling the race early, I'm referring to how just into the caucusing, with a small percentage of the voter turnout announced, various networks were saying that Donald Trump had won, which, of course, frustrated DeSantis and his team, his campaign, because they saw people actively turn away from voting once the announcement was made. There would be people waiting in line, and then the announcement was made that Donald Trump had won before he had actually won. So, of course, voters were like, okay, I'm going to go home then. It's too cold out here for this. that sort of thing. So it is, in a sense, election interference. It is. I'm not saying it's illegal or anything like that, but shame on the media and the Donald Trump supporters, the MAGA members who think it's great this time around that would happen. Well, they thought that it was terrible last time around in states like Arizona, what have you. Take that one from Kari Lake or whoever was complaining about that one. But, on with what I had to say here. And you can feel free to disagree with me, as I'm sure many of you may. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what you know. And here I go. Personally, I wish that the first two names on the results could be switched. But the people who braved the winter weather have spoken, and they choose the deep state obliterator to be their eventual nominee on account of their apparent appreciation for the fact that he has upped the rhetorical ante after failing to keep his promise to drain the swamp last time around. Of course, he also says that he's going to be the retribution of his voters. But then when that turns out to be a controversial statement, he says, actually, I'm not going to have time for retribution. Instead, I'm just going to be super duper successful. And that will be, in its own right, retribution. Thus, he redefines the word retribution. That's him on pretty much every issue, though. If you really listen to him and you really think about it, he doesn't really have an answer for much of anything. He has about 5 different answers, and he tries to pretend that they're all the same answer, and his voters pretend right along with him that they're all the same answer, when really they're not. It's just a bunch of political mumbo-jumbo, just like we get from, say, Nikki Haley on pretty much every issue. Considering how Trump is the biggest whataboutism the Democrats have ever, I repeat, ever been blessed with enough personal beef and baggage to bury a bully's bully, if he actually wins in the end, presumably in a battle between geriatric jokers, I'll expect nothing less than 4 more years of drama so divisive that the fake news will have every incentive to be faker than ever before. For the sake of ratings, of course. Whether they like Donald Trump or not, Donald Trump is good for the ratings. Keep in mind that CNN essentially helped propel Donald Trump to victory in 2016 because they gave him so much airtime that they regretted it. So if even they unintentionally propped up Donald Trump because it was good for ratings to do so, I'm not really taking it from Republicans who are like, Fox News, they're too mean to Donald Trump. Ugh. Because they ousted Tucker Carlson or something like that. They don't really like, of course they like Donald Trump. He's great for the ratings, even if they're criticizing. Just think about the fact that during the latest Republican debate, which Donald Trump refused to participate in, on CNN, Fox News hosted their own event specifically with Donald Trump to compete with the ratings of the actual Republican debate. So they gave Donald Trump this platform in order for him to compete with the debate without actually having to compete with the debaters. So, of course, Fox News is willing to work with Donald Trump even after everything. So I don't want to hear about how they're out to get Donald Trump. They're not. They have every reason to, but they're not. They're going to prop him up just like everyone else, intentionally or unintentionally. It's like one big psychologically draining cycle of political self-promotion and self-deprecation. Republicans couldn't spot a true representative of their own increasingly devalued conservative values if it or he slapped them in the face. And Democrats are too busy slapping themselves in the face for fear of dictatorship to see that they themselves wish nothing more than to dictate what happens next. Thus, their efforts, whether authentic or not, to remove him from ballots. It could be that they just want to make him more popular in the short term in order to have Joe Biden defeat him once again. Yes, that did happen. I know some of you don't believe it, but hey, if you're like, Donald Trump definitely had the last election stolen from him, also he's definitely going to win this one, I have some questions for you as well. The American field of dreams / nightmares is now full of rakes and snakes, and I'm simply sick and tired of seeing people, politicians, and pundits going out of their way to step on every last one of them while simultaneously complaining about how the opposition party is placing rakes and snakes in said field. At this rate, if it's ultimately a Donald Trump versus Joe Biden rematch of sorts, I'm voting for neither. You heard it here first. Because I'd be a glutton for punishment either way. Trump doesn't truly care about anyone but himself, and Biden barely remembers himself. I refuse to continue chasing a shiny object when substance is there for the taking. By substance, I'm referring to Ron DeSantis, which is why I wish those two frontrunners in the Iowa caucus would have been switched around. Here's the 2024 delegate tracker. Read it and weep. But yes, Ron DeSantis accumulated 8 delegates. Donald Trump accumulated 20 delegates. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley is pretending that she came in second in Iowa. Of course, maybe she's hoping that will ultimately be proven true through her run in the Carolinas, her hometown. But it could very well be the case that Ron DeSantis is more popular even there than her, since she didn't accomplish all that much when she was the governor there. But some have argued that Ron DeSantis has accomplished more in her own home state than she has herself. And that's an interesting exaggeration, which may not actually be exaggerated all that much. Scrolling on down, I have a few more thoughts, and then I got to get out of here. Man, I am running late. Donald Trump likes to pretend that he's the only thing that's protecting us from the attacks of the Democrats/left. But in all actuality, he's just a never-ending list of reasons for them to attack us. Now we're all extreme MAGA Republicans. And if you're wondering what that reference is all about, well, look no further than this post from Joe Biden, who said, "Looks like Donald Trump just won Iowa. He's the clear front runner on the other side at this point. But here's the thing. This election was always going to be you and me versus extreme MAGA Republicans." Keep in mind that MAGA is Donald Trump's brand. It was true yesterday, and it'll be true tomorrow. So if you're with us, chip in now, says Joe Biden, who can barely remember himself. So yeah, the talking points are already rolling in because Donald Trump hands the talking points to them on a silver platter. Here's what else I have to say about that. Now we're all extreme MAGA Republicans. I, as a conservative, automatically have that target on my back. And so do you. The narrative is just too easy to establish because the establishment feeds on low-hanging fruit, and Trump specifically, or Trump's specialty, I should say, just so happens to be low-hanging fruit trees. Yeah, they go after all the low-hanging fruit, and he is more than willing to provide it all for them. In other words, Donald Trump says something that a dictator would say, not that he'd ever be one, and the Democrats immediately jump all over it, saying, "Donald Trump is the next dictator." And then he pretends that he never said anything wrong, while shape-shifting his language in order to pretend that he's saying something else. And around we go. And where it will stop, nobody knows. Just a couple more things here, and I will add to this thread. What I'm doing lately on X, formerly known as Twitter, is putting together different threads with my thoughts and then sharing them here on my YouTube channel. I didn't have much time to put this one together, so there's just a few portions to it. I'll add more portions to it as time goes by, and that will probably be my next show. But additional info here for you. These were the results of the Democrats caucusing in Iowa in 2020. Joe Biden was only 4th, but ended up being the nominee. Think of that what you may. I had some typos there. This was late last night. I was half asleep at this point. Think what you may of that would be a better way to word that. Obviously, the gap between Trump and DeSantis is more substantial with additional factors. So I'm not saying that this is a reverse equation or that it's equatable from Republican to Democrat. But as you can see here, Joe Biden was 4th in the Iowa Caucus. Caucus in 2020. Ended up becoming the nominee and winning the election over Donald Trump in the end. But he had Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg above him at that time, as was the story of most of that race. And guess what? The establishment coalesced behind Joe Biden. And believe it or not, or like it or not, the Republican establishment is now coalescing behind Donald Trump. They just are. Some of those ones I already mentioned, some of those names in Congress and then Senate. Just think, who exactly is endorsing Ron DeSantis? Well, Chip Roy and Thomas Massie, some of the non-establishment types who Republicans preferred over the other Republicans until 5 minutes ago. Now only to be very much enthralled and thrilled by the fact that all of the other more establishment Republicans in Congress have now decided to endorse Donald Trump, or at least some of them have. Some of them don't say anything, at least not at this point in the race. Rand Paul, for example, did come out as being never Nikki, but he didn't actually endorse a candidate specifically. But yes, I could also add to that, seeing as how Donald Trump lost the Iowa caucus to Ted Cruz back in 2016, yet went on to become the president, I'd say that his current success in Iowa is quite significant, strategically speaking. So despite what I just showed you about the Democrats Iowa caucusing in 2020, back in 2016, Donald Trump lost the Iowa caucus to Ted Cruz. He wasn't last, but he wasn't first. And still went on to become the president. So with that being taken into consideration, then yes, it is quite significant that the same man, well, he essentially wiped the floor with the other candidates this time around. Though Ron DeSantis is sticking in it. He is in it to win it. And I applaud him for that because his campaign name is Never Back Down. So there's that. And here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal. I'm not going to pull up the ad or the article. While Donald Trump cruised to the Republican presidential nomination in 2016 on his path to winning the presidency, he started off in the losing column. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, his fiercest competitor, won the crowded Iowa contest with 27.6% of the vote to 24.3% for Trump, and 23.1% for Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who was very critical of Donald Trump at the time, calling him a fraud and other names, only to ultimately drop out and endorse him, just as he has once again done, without the dropping out part since he didn't run this time around. Other candidates include cardiologist Ben Carson, who is attached at the hip to Donald Trump at this point, to the point where I wonder if he will be chosen as the vice president. It's a possibility. Then there was Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, the aforementioned Rand Paul, who also had very critical things to say about Donald Trump at the time. And former Florida Governor Jeb Bush split the rest. Yeah, those lastly mentioned names, they split the rest of those votes. But it was Ted Cruz, then Donald Trump, then Marco Rubio, so on and so forth. And lastly, here's this. I just saw this from Raw's Alerts yesterday. Breaking: Donald Trump has won 98 out of 99 Iowa counties after Nikki Haley flipped Johnson County with a single vote over Trump. A lot of red there. Not just red, but orange red, meaning orange man red. Red in favor of Donald Trump. You can see the numbers here up at the top. The one area where Nikki Haley picked up the victory by 1 point. Look at that. 1,271 to 1,270. For the rest of it, though, Donald Trump with flying red colors took the win. Let me show you one more thing. What I had to say just before the caucusing began. I got to scroll down and find it. Then I'm going to be up and out of here, as late to work as I am. There is snow and ice on the ground. I wanted to give myself more time to get to and from work. But I'm running late as per usual. Okay, two things here I could read. Here's the first one. Word to Trump supporters in Iowa. The crap that Donald Trump gives about you extends only as far as your usefulness to him. Also, he'd have you believe not only that he's more effective as an ex-president than Ron DeSantis is as a current governor, but that DeSantis is missing in action by working hard for your votes on the campaign trail while Trump is swooping in last minute with a stack of pizza boxes and an astounding level of self-entitlement to insult your governor and claim an undeserved victory. Trump is the troller-in-chief, basically. Trump was never the solution. He simply emphasized the problems. You can do better than him, Iowa. But, of course, nobody listens to me since I'm irrelevant on social media. But that's what I had to say about that. And one more thing. After the caucusing, Donald Trump didn't deserve to win Iowa at all. And the leftist MSM networks and network hosts currently ranting and raving about dictatorship can miss me with their hyperbolic hysteria. Yes, I hold both of those positions. Let me read that one more time since I butchered it. Donald Trump didn't deserve to win Iowa at all. And the leftist MSM network hosts currently ranting and raving about dictatorship can miss me with their hyperbolic hysteria. Yes, I hold both of those positions. I am personally disgusted by our current state of politics, and metaphorically speaking, our current establishment-saturated voting system, or shall I say voting culture, consists of a bunch of desperate dogs who are fighting over two different piles of vomit. Put that in a biblical proportion. Dogs returning to their vomit. That's right, we have two different piles of vomit with their voters, their constituents, fighting desperately over them. I've had enough. All right. I'm going to go now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Keep in touch. Keep it tuned. New content is coming soon. Like it or not. Peace.